So now we're ready to actually move on to the skirt part of our dress. So we're progressing really quickly through this. So I have tried to put this little bodice onto Cynthia because Molly is at my house at the moment. So Cynthia found I've not quite made it quite big enough to go all the way around her at the back. If I had remembered to add in that extra zipper allowance that I was planning to, she probably would have closed up into it quite nicely. You can also see it doesn't quite sit very well on her at the shoulder seam. So if I was fitting this to a real person, I would look at things like that. You know, where is it sitting nicely? It's kind of going up. You know, if I was going to put a shoulder pad in, that would be nice, but that's not the look I'm going for. So there's a couple, sorry about shaking the camera so much, but there's a couple of examples of how you could fit it. So I'm going to show you a couple of different techniques for what you might like to do with the skirt. Now, we're going to do, so if you already go back to the pattern modification video, you'll see that there is actually a pattern to do a more of a fitted skirt, which you're welcome to do. That would also then take you into making it more of an A-line with no pleats or gathers into it. If you wanted to do pleats or gathers though, so if you're doing either of those two versions, following the pattern, putting the darts into it if you're doing the fitted one because you need them to sort of shape around. If you're actually wanting to put gathers or pleats in, the easiest way is to actually just cut a really long rectangle. And you can cut it, you know, I've decided to keep it going with the lines going vertically. You know, you could choose to make the lines going horizontally just to add a bit of contrast if you wanted. It's up to you. Or if you had different pattern and you wanted to move it a different way, you could also have, say, a pattern skirt and a plain bodice. There's so many different, or vice versa, there's so many different things you could do, just playing around with the different patterns and the different fabrics that you use as well. So if I'm going to do it as a gathered or pleated, it's easier to have it cut as a long rectangle along either the grain or the cross grain of my woven fabric. The reason for that is it's going to make our hem heaps easier to do. It's going to mean we don't have to do as much leveling of it afterwards. So this is a really good quick technique to do. So I'll just show you pinning wise if you wanted to do the pleats. I don't think I have brought I don't have my pleat example with me, but I did show it to you in the pattern modification video. So if I wanted to do the pleats, what I would do is actually start pinning. So I could pin I'll fold it in half to find the center. So here's my center. So pin the two centers together. If I really want to be particular, I can try and line up lines, because that's always nice, but remember there will be seam allowance in there, so take it up a little bit to include seam allowance. And I can actually play around now with where I want my pleats to sit. So I could do inverted box pleats if I wanted to, like this. And I would just pleat all the way around this. You don't even have to have the pleat, you have to have enough pleats to give it enough fullness to go over the hips. You don't have to have the whole thing pleated. You could do pleats that are all going one direction, slightly more of a sunray look. So with a box pleat, I'm sort of going one way, the next one going the other way. So one going to the left, and obviously I want to keep them even, and when they are joining together, when they're going towards each other, I'm actually joining them together, so that gives you the box shape. You can even do ones that overlap each other as well. If you want to have a lot of fullness in there, you could definitely say do one where it has to overlap behind it, and that's just going to give you heaps of fullness in there as well. I'm actually just bringing it, hopefully this is coming up on camera, keeping it the same size and bringing it so that it meets there. Yeah, I think that's coming out on camera okay. So I'll put one more pin in here and I'll show you how this one is sitting. So that would be sitting with some nice box pleats around it. The one I'm actually going to sew up and show you those doing the gather, because then so if I was going to continue with the box pleats, I'd pleat them all along, and then I would top stitch them down so that they're staying, and I'd probably actually do 2 lines of top stitching, not a full seam allowance away. I'd sort of do them, you know, maybe a centimetre in and then a couple of millimetres below that, so they're not the full, they're not going all the way down to my seam allowance marking. Alright, so I'm going to take this out and I'm going to take you over to the sewing machine and show you how I would do the gathers. So hopefully it's a technique you've already had a little play with, but just in case, I will actually demonstrate to you doing a gather for your skirt. So when I'm going to gather, what I want to do first is actually put my, catching that on camera, just move the camera up a bit. I'm going to make sure my machine is on a straight stitch, which it already has been, because it's the only one I've been working on today. And I'm actually going to put my length all the way up as high as it goes. So on these machines it goes up to 4. So it's going all the way up as high as it goes. Some other machines, you know, go up to different levels. So you might have one at home that goes up to 5 or something. Mine just, these ones at school just go up to 4. So I'm going to now do 2 long lines of stitching. I'm not going to go quite all the way to the edge here because there's going to be some zipper allowance in there that I don't want to have gathered. And yeah, I'm just going to sew 2 long lines, and I'm going to sew them not quite at my seam allowance point. So I'm going to use the edge of my presser foot as a guide for this. And I'm also not going to backstitch. It can be a bit counterintuitive. You're really used to backstitching. And I just want to make sure I don't sew over this line, so I'm just going to, or this thread, move it out of the way. You find when you're on such a long length, it's going to sew really, really quickly, all the way to the edge. Keeps getting caught on my big baby belly. There we go. Probably didn't need to go quite that far. And again, I'm not going to backstitch. Now when I cut this off, I'm going to leave a little bit trailing off. Also pay attention to what side of your fabric you're sewing this on. I'm going to sew a second line now. I'm going to sew it on the same side of my fabric. That's quite important. And I'm going to keep it a really even distance away from that last one that I've sewn. So I'm going to go slightly more in now. So the reason I do 2 gather lines, some people say, oh, it's in case you break one. But actually it's not in case you break one. If you break one, you still want to re-stitch that one up as well. It actually makes it sit just a little bit more flat and even and gives you a clearer place to attach it. You sort of have to just have a go at doing it to realise what I mean by that. Okay, so I'm not back stitching. Now what I'm going to do, oh, I should have left a little bit more of that trailing off. So now what I'm going to do is I'm going to pull from the bobbins, I'm going to pull these threads from the bobbin side. So the bobbin side is going to be this side, so the wrong side of my fabric, or whatever side that you had down against the bobbin. So I'm going to be pulling this thread here, and with my top one, I'm going to be pulling that thread there. So make yourself comfortable. You'll be doing this for a little while. I'm going to pull on them and do it fairly, you can get a bit of pressure on it, but still just be gentle with it. You don't want to be snapping your threads. Different fabrics will gather easier than other fabrics as well. If you've got a really tight weave, you might find that threads get a little bit more stuck. So you're going to gather this until it is the right size to go all the way around the waist seam of your dress or of your bodice. So if you get halfway and you think actually it's getting a bit annoying pulling from that side, you can then start pulling from the other side. So making sure you're pulling those same threads. I'm not going to start pulling the top threads. You can achieve this technique by pulling the top threads. It does still work. It's just a bit tighter to pull on. And you also want to make sure whichever one you're doing, you only use that one, because if I start now pulling on the top threads from either side, it's actually just going to sort of pinch up my threads and stop letting me gather. So I might have over gathered this. I'll need to take it over to my mannequin or to little Cynthia to see what's going on. You can always be checking it against yourself and against your bodice as well, the waistline of your bodice. And I want to just be checking that I'm doing this gather nice and evenly. So you can see there how I've got a nice kind of, especially in this fabric, has a bit of a curtain look to it, but you can see how I've got a nice gather here. And having the 2 lines of stitching makes it sit flatter as well. So if I didn't have 2 lines of stitching, it would really buckle up and down a lot more, and I'm more likely when I sew it to then be accidentally folding pieces over like this. Sorry, I've just gone off camera, haven't I? Folding pieces over like that and sewing them down because they're buckling so much everywhere. So I will pause this video, or so I'm going to stop this video here. So that's one way that you could make your skirt. If I had this as the pleats, I would just be top stitching that whole line down. And yeah, then, or if I was doing my skirt as A-line, I would be sewing up my side seams of it, same as you sewed your side seams for this bodice, except you would want to overlock them this time, unless you're, even if you're lining them actually, still overlock the seams. If you're doing a double layer, of course you can do this twice. You can use a double layer of fabric, so if you wanted a sheer layer over top, or say your lining layer would count as a second layer as well. For this one, I'm just doing 1 layer of this, so it's very, very, very simple. So I think that's all I need to cover for this video, and I'll see you in the next one. Bye!